2023 basketball recruit John Blackwell stopped by the show. What about his mentality is so unique, and what is he going to bring to the Badgers?
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to Locked On Badgers, making it your first listen every day. Free and available wherever you get your podcast, your number one source for everything happening with the Wisconsin Badgers, football and basketball programs. Free and available where you get podcasts, free and available on YouTube. We appreciate everybody listening to the show. Let's get into we had a chance to talk with John Blackwell, 2023 combo guard out of Brother Rice, Michigan high school up in Bloomfield. And unfortunately, guys, the interview was great, but the audio content, it came out really weird and I couldn't fix it. I'm not audio technically savvy enough to figure out how to make, and it's really unfortunate because we had a really good 20-minute conversation. He had a lot of really good insight, interesting stuff to say. So I want to kind of let you know what he said, but I also want to apologize that I couldn't get the audio to come out clear enough that I felt comfortable using it. I definitely want to, everything we give you guys, I want the quality to be strong enough that nobody is frustrated listening to it. So I am frustrated. I really appreciate John coming on the show. And I blame myself. Something in the audio went messed up and I couldn't fix it. But I want to get into a little bit of what he did say and why his mentality is so unique. So again, John Blackwell is a 6'3" combo guard out of Michigan, committed to the University of Wisconsin, first committed in that class. And let's start off with the fact that he is a shooter, 49% from deep. And when you watch film, the really interesting and unique thing about Blackwell is a lot of high school kids, right? It's catch and shoot, or it's put their head down and get to the rim at all costs. Blackwell's got a lot more nuance in his game, and I talked to him about it. He's got mid-range. He's got off the dribble pull-ups around the elbow. A little fake spin move. He's got a hesitation move, right, that he gets into a jumper with. Pass fake three, in transition three. A lot of nuance to his game. And he talked about it. He said his dad always told him the mid-range is a place where you need to be able to thrive to be an elite scorer. And a lot of kids don't have that. Like I said, a lot of kids are jump shooters from three, stationary jump shooters, or they put their head down and they dribble into two bodies and they pick up a charge, or they throw something wild off the glass. He's much more skilled than that, Blackwell. And I think that game is really going to translate well. There's a bit of a myth with basketball now that you have to shoot threes, like the mid-range is inefficient. And yet you look in the NBA, it's guys like Chris Paul, right? It's guys like DeMar DeRozan. It's Devin Booker, right? It's all these dudes who thrive in the mid-range. You have to be a good mid-range shooter. Not having that in your tool belt makes it a lot more difficult. And Blackwell has all of that. And he talked about it. It's hours upon hours in the gym that he's put in on that jump shot. I think it's going to give him a lot of ability to come in and really be a versatile offensive player pretty quickly. The other thing he talked about, and I thought this was really good. I asked him, would you rather be a 20-point scorer or 15 and 5 assists? He went right to 15 and 5 assists. I asked him what his goals are for this season. His goals, because he had one more year at high school. And he immediately went into, I want my teammates to be better. I want them to get offers. I want them to get schollies. I want to win a national or a high school title. It was so impressive to hear him talk about everything in relation to the program being better, right? For everything in relation to him elevating the people around him. And a lot of people, when you ask them, hey, what are your goals for this year? It's I want to score 20 a game, or I want to do this, or I'm going to do this. Blackwell was 100%. I'm going to do what I can to make my teammates better. I want my team to succeed. I want my teammates to be better. It was really refreshing. And it's a type of mentality that's going to fit in really well with the Wisconsin culture, with great guard, with the type of players that we've typically recruited. He's going to be a great locker room guy, in my opinion. I don't know him really well, but basing this on the conversations, basing it on guard, making him such a priority. Again, I asked him what his goals are for Madison. Right. What would be a successful 4 years for you in Madison? And it was the same thing, man. His initial response to that is not, I want to be a 20-point scorer, or I want to be this. It was, I want to win a natty. Period. Checks that box, right? I want to win a national title. Yeah. Like he's a team guy, man. And that mentality is going to go really well with the Badgers. The other thing that he brings to the game, there's a lot of defensive versatility with him. He's 6'3", 6'4". He's got a good frame. He's long. He's athletic. I don't think he is I don't know if he's quite big enough to guard threes on switches. He's going to get a little stronger, but he's definitely a guy who's going to be able to guard ones, twos, and some threes. Like that flexibility, that defense versatility is going to be there. And he talked about it. He talked about typically guarding the other team's best player, taking that responsibility on and really attacking with a certain mindset. And then on top of it, offensively, he's got a bit of a secondary playmaking ability, driving in, drawing defenders, kicking it out. And it's going to be a guy, a lot of basketball now is versatility. It's positionless basketball, right? We've talked about that a lot. You don't need a guy who's just only a 1 and only a 2 and only a 3. Getting a guy who can play a 1, 2, and maybe a 3. Getting a guy who can cover the 3, 4. Getting a guy who can cover the 4 and 5. Giving that positional versatility allows you to guard more people, allows you to play a more free-flowing style of offense. This is a guy, Blackwell, who he's going to come in. He's going to be primarily a 2, in my opinion. He can shoot it really well. But when Chucky Hepburn or whoever the point guard goes out, maybe it's Kamari. When he goes out, I think Blackwell's the type of guy, and again, the story isn't written on this yet. We have to see how he develops, but he's the type of player, right, who when that point guard goes out, you can slide him over to the 1. So you can slide Blackwell to the 1 and bring in someone else. Maybe then a Segian comes in off the bench at the 2 or something like that. Just having that type of flexibility, I think it makes the roster easier to construct and manage. It prevents some of the dependency. If a guy gets hurt or foul trouble, can really sink a season. So Blackwell is a guy who I think this is a big time. It's not a 4 or 5 star guy. It's not a guy who came in with a lot of recruiting hype, a lot of big offers outside of Wisconsin. But I think it's a guy who's going to be a really good positional, solid rotational player. And if you get that out of a recruit, it's a win. The other thing to keep in mind when you look at his offer list, and maybe you don't see the biggest offer list, guard knows talent, right? Like Greg Gard has struggled, and this staff has struggled at times closing on the talent they identify. We've seen that both in the transfer market and in the high school recruiting market. But he knows talent. He identifies kids early, and he was on Blackwell early. And I think in this situation, you trust him. And then again, from the conversation I was able to have with Blackwell, and again, I apologize that we couldn't post that, but I'm taking snippets from it. I'm telling you guys, he's coming in with the right mindset. He's going to be a team guy, and definitely somebody who's very concerned about raising the program, right? Raising the level play of people around him. And those are the type of players, especially in the backcourt, that are winners at the college level, right? They're the Chucky Hepburn type players, right? The Bronson Koenig type players, the guys who make everyone else around them better. So I think it's a big get. Someone I'm excited to continue to watch develop. Definitely someone who I'm going to be excited to watch his senior year to see how he develops a little bit more. But I think it's a really good get, guys. I think you're really going to enjoy him. Coming up later on today's show, we are going to talk about, we got some listener comments and questions. We're going to dive into that. And perhaps a Deebo Samuel type role for somebody on the team. Definitely some interesting thoughts to dive into. But first, today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar continues to be just one of the ultimate fitness companions on my journey. I just ordered a new 12-pack, the variety pack. That should be coming any day now. As soon as Amazon drops it off, I dive into them. Listen, I got a gym down the road. I throw Built Bar in the backpack. I go to the gym. I hit the weights, get on the treadmill a little bit. And when I'm done, I can feel confident in fueling up my body with Built Bar. It's become kind of a cult at Locked On. It's for all the right reasons. It's a way to fuel your body and not seem like you're eating cardboard, right? And we're not going to name the different protein bars out there, but you and I both had them. We've all had them. Some of them taste like they only care about making healthy things. Built Bar took something that tastes incredible, 100% chocolate, tons of amazing flavors, and then they found a way to make it healthy. I promise you will not regret it. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Promo code LOCK15 for 15% off your order at built.com. Guys, thanks again for making Locked On Badgers your first listen every day. Starting April 28th, tune in to Locked On NFL Draft's live coverage of the 2022 NFL Draft. 3 days of real-time analysis from our extensive lineup of experts and insiders. Listen, it's coming up. It's almost here. You're not going to find better coverage on the NFL Draft than with Matt Williamson, Brian Peacock. Locked On NFL Draft Live, starting April 28th, the first 3 rounds. Get it there. All right, guys. Next up, told you we had some comments and questions I want to jump into. Some listeners on YouTube, email reached out. They either had some comments I found interesting or a couple questions, and I thought some of them would be really kind of fun to throw out here and discuss. The first one regarded this is from Kevin off our YouTube page, and he's been a really good listener, and some of that's really been supportive of the show, which we appreciate. He talked about Gurrendo, and for those, again, Isaac Gurrendo, the running back, who has battled injury problems just nonstop. But physically, that's one of our top of the board athletes on this team, especially in the running back room, right? You're talking about a guy who's big, he's physical, and he's a burner. Like Gurrendo is a 23-mile-an-hour guy, right? He's a 4.35 type guy with 220 pounds behind him. And, Kevin mentioned, could we see maybe like a Deebo Samuel type of a role for Gurrendo? Something in that area where you just try to get him the ball. And I think so, right? With Gurrendo, it's all about just getting healthy. That's it. Period. I think if he gets healthy, they're going to find ways to give him the ball because you can't have a dude that big and that fast and then not hand him the rock, right? So, yeah, jet sweeps. We saw it with him when he was in there at the beginning of last year. Screen passes, short things. Just get him the ball in space. Let him have a linebacker one-on-one and see what happens. And I think you're going to see that this year if he can get healthy. All signs point to him so far getting close to that, right? It doesn't sound like there's been any setbacks in his recovery. It's probably someone definitely who's been in the program a couple of years. So the coaching staff is probably not going to push it with him. They're not going to be in a rush to get him out there until they know for sure he's good to go. But yeah, a Deebo role will be interesting to me. And I think he's got that physical role. Again, Deebo is high praise, so we call it Deebo-lite. Right. But Gurrendo's got the physical tools that can do a ton of damage in space. And the other interesting thing with this, when you're talking a Deebo role, you're kind of talking somebody who can do a lot of damage without a ton of catches, a ton of touches, right? And I think that's Gurrendo because you don't want to overuse them. But because of the injury history, because you got Braylon Allen anyway, right? So 8 to 12 touches a game, 6 to 10, 4 to 8, or probably 4 to 8. That's probably the range. But in those 4 to 8, you're putting giving one of the best athletes on the team, one of the best size and speed combinations on the team. You're giving him 5-6 chances a game to bust one, right? And that could be the difference. That could be the difference in when we're traveling to, Columbus for that week 4 game at night. That could be that type of difference, that big 40, 50-yard gashing play that we haven't seen a ton of recently. Gurrendo's the guy that could potentially deliver that. So, yeah, great comment, great question, great thoughts. And follow-up question from Kevin. And we touched a little bit on the quarterback depth chart, right? The lack of internal options. We did a show several weeks ago on that. He was kind of asking, and I think this is a really good question, right? If Mertz struggles, let's say for the first 3 or 4 games, especially with the easy slate to open the season, right? If we're not seeing improvement in the passing game and the quarterback play against Eastern Illinois, when we're playing the kind of soft cupcakes of the schedule, it begs the question, is there a point this season where we could shift to Chase Wolf or Deacon Hill, right? And Kevin asked about Deacon Hill specifically because I think we've seen that Chase Wolf probably isn't the guy. He's probably never going to be the answer. But it's really interesting, right? If Mertz doesn't get better, is there any point this season where they shift to Deacon? I got to tell you, I don't think the answer is yes. I'm not saying I think it's the wrong answer. I'm saying from what we know of Paul Chryst, from what we know of this program, I think it would take an injury for them to move off Mertz. I think he would, even if he doesn't play better than he did last year, I think it would take an injury. I think Paul Chryst and his staff, for better and worse, like there's pluses and negatives to this. I think for better or worse, they are probably a little slower to make reactionary moves, right? I think we saw it in the fact that they didn't bring anyone in this offseason as a transfer to challenge Mertz. I think Mertz is their guy this year, barring either some type of terrible injury, which we'll obviously never hope for, or maybe he just completely falls off the rails. Like if he's worse than last year, maybe we can discuss it. But, I don't think if he struggles in the early season, they would make a move to Hill. It just doesn't seem to fit with where Chryst is as a coach and where this program is. I think what they would do, for better or worse, is the same thing you saw last year, right? They would tone down the passing game. They would get ultra conservative. They would try to lean on Braylon Allen and Ches Malusi and whoever else, play ball control, and really just try to gut out ugly games. I think that's what would happen. I'm not saying I wouldn't make the move to Deacon. I think at some point if Mertz struggles again this year, you probably know what he is, right? I mean, that's probably a large enough data set that you can say, let's get the younger guy a look. And Deacon has a great arm. He was a pretty highly recruited kid coming out of California. So, we have no idea how ready he actually is. But if Mertz isn't playing better, it does beg the question, what do you have to lose by going to Deacon, right? If you're going to play a conservative style of game, you're just going to hand it off a ton, rely on the defense. Well, Deacon Hill can do that, can he? I mean, he's been in the program for over a year now. He can't play that super conservative style. Again, I don't know. This is all a bit of speculation, and hopefully it's a moot point, right? Hopefully Mertz plays better. Because if Mertz comes out and he shows improvement and the passing game shows improvement, well, that answers the question right there. It's definitely not going to switch up then. But we don't know if that's going to happen. And we have seen enough of Graham Mertz to know that there's inconsistencies there. And if he doesn't get better, it's certainly possible that the coaching staff could look towards Deacon Hill or Chase Wolf. I just don't see it. I don't see it this year. I think the question's valid. And I know a lot of people would disagree with the fact that we want shifted over to Deacon Hill if Mertz struggles, but I just don't think Paul Chryst would be one of those people. Moving on, there was a question about the defensive line as well, a follow-up question in our inbox in our Gmail account, asking about, is the defensive line athletic enough? Essentially, we've had a lot of space eaters on the defensive line in the past. Is this defensive line athletic enough to be a difference maker, or is it all going to be on the linebackers to make the plays? I got to tell you, I don't think this is a super athletic defensive line. I think it's deep. I think there's a lot of good players. I think Keanu Benton is an NFL nose tackle, right? I like Rodas Johnson. I like James Thompson. Is there any great athlete there? No, I don't think so. I think Matt Henningsen leaving hurts. I don't know if they're going to adequately replace him. Isaiah Mullins is going to start at one of the sides, and he's really just a space eating. He's going to eat up blocks. He's going to set the edge. He's not going to get moved. He's kind of like a sawed-off tree trunk. You're not going to push him around, but he's not going to get in the backfield. Even Benton is a guy who we've seen him against Ohio State, right, make impact in the backfield, but he's not a consistent pass rusher. He's not a guy, he's not Gerald McCoy, collapsing the middle every play. So, no, listen, I think it's a valid question. I think the defense line is definitely not a weakness. They're going to be really stout against the run again. Is it going to be a really athletic unit that generates pressure by themselves? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's this year's defensive line. It's still going to be really good. I think in a previous episode, I graded it out as like a B. Which is good. Like, this defense is going to be super salty, and the defense line is an enormous part of that. Keanu Benton's one of the most important players on the team, right? Rodas Johnson has a lot of upside. In last year's practices, he was apparently flashing. We just didn't see a ton of it on the field. James Thompson is a guy that staff has been high on for a long time. Athletic kid, defensive end. Maybe, if you're gonna point to somebody and say, this is the guy that maybe elevates the defensive line, maybe that's James Thompson. It's probably a guy like that who we haven't seen a ton of, who could come in and be maybe a slightly more athletic version of what we've had at defensive end. And whether or not that happens, we don't know. We'll have to see. But it's also important to note that the minimum requirements, right, for the defensive line on this team in the 3-4 is to occupy blockers, stop the run, and free up lanes for the linebackers. This defensive line is going to do that. Okay. No doubts. This defensive line is going to be tough to run on, tough to push around. They're going to occupy blockers, and they're going to allow room for the linebackers to run around and make a ton of plays. Okay. I think the difference, if we ever got to a point where we had that in the defense line, as well as some dudes who could be a little more disruptive, you might see the defense, as crazy as it is to say, get even better. Because statistically, this was the best defense in college football last year. But you might see the defense have a different element and be able to do maybe a little more against the high-powered offenses with a slightly more athletic defensive line. I don't think we're going to see that this year, but I think the defense line is going to be really good. Definitely not a weakness. And I appreciate the questions and comments, guys. If you have any more, please feel free to reach out to the show. Send them either on Twitter, on Gmail, Twitter. We'll answer them on the show. We'll get to them. Really appreciate that. Coming up after our next sponsor of the show, we're going to talk a little bit about this defense. And are we in a position now where the Badgers defense doesn't rebuild anymore? It's just a reload. We're going to get into it. I have some interesting thoughts on that. Today's show is also brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the number one source for all your sports wagering, sports gambling information needs. This website is easy to use. It's an incredible time of the year to do this, right? Baseball starting up, basketball playoffs are going on. You still have NFL futures coming up, right? The draft is about to happen. If you have a good feel on who's going to win the NFC, the AFC, I've talked about Niners and Bengals, both of them. To me, you can get the Niners at like plus 400 almost. That's, if you believe in Trey Lance, that's a team that was in the NFC Championship game last year with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? If Trey Lance is the answer to their quarterback, they could be an easy Super Bowl team. NBA playoffs, right? You can talk about Devin Booker missing games for the Phoenix Suns. That dropped them way down. If you think Booker's going to be back in a week or two, 2 weeks ago, the favorite. The Phoenix Suns were the favorite. This is a great time to maybe get some value there. So BetOnline, again, easy to use. It's a great time of the year to do it. Also has live gambling, sport casino games, blackjack, roulette. Just a great website. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, guys. The last segment we want to talk about, I think this is a really interesting discussion. Are the Badgers defensively in a spot now where they've been so good for so long? Is this just a rebuild defense now? They're never reloading. And I wanted to bring it up because when you look at the players that the Badgers have lost from last year's team, right, it's basically the entire secondary. Guys going to the NFL or trying to, Colin Wilder, Scott Nelson, Faion Hicks, Caesar Williams. I mean, you're losing so much out of that secondary. Dean Ingram switching over from corner to receiver. You're losing your two best linebackers, or two of your three best, right, with Sanborn and Chanel. Chanel's going to be a first, second, third round pick this year. You're losing Matt Henningsen, who was a total star at defensive end. You're losing a ton off that defense. Right there, we just named six starter, really good type players. And yet, I talk to Badger fans and I hear Badger talk. I think people expect the defense to maybe be better this year. And it got me thinking, are we just in a position defensively where we're always going to just continue reloading? Like, we just don't have concerns about it. And I think we are. Because you look at the linebackers, right? We're losing 3 out of 4 starters last year. I think everyone thinks the linebackers are going to be great this year. The outside linebacker position is so deep. And then in the inside spot, there's a guy like Jordan Turner. People are so excited for Turner. It's almost like they're forgetting who we're losing. But Turner looked incredible last year, right? Nanjameta is somebody who people talked about a long time. Chaney, Jake Chaney is a coach's kid, and they found time to get him last year. Jake Ratzlaff is a 4-star inside linebacker out of Minnesota that is a missile. People look at the linebacker room, and yeah, we lost Chanel and Sanborn, but you just rattle off easily 4 guys at the inside and 6 guys on the outside that people are legitimately excited about. And not just excited in the way where fans always are excited about the next crop of kids, like this kid's going to be great. I mean, these are all like 3-4-star kids who have shown out. Daryl Peterson was a terror in high school off the edge. He's going to be one of the outside linebacker guys this year. And I think he's going to be a star, right? Aaron Witt, the staff loves. He hasn't been able to get healthy. But if he gets out there, it's going to be another guy. Nick Herbig's probably going to leave early to the NFL next year from outside linebacker. They have so much there that it's almost like you lose 2 of the best linebackers in the Big Ten in Leo Chanel and Sanborn. And I don't know if we're going to miss a beat, right? We talked about defensive line. The defensive line is going to be really good this year. Again, we talked about it might not be the most athletic, but it wasn't last year either. And you lose Matt Henningsen. Who do you replace him with? Isaiah Mullins, Rodis Johnson. That's a lot of really talented upperclassmen coming in. And Mike Jarvis is an underclassman at defensive end that came in last year, came in at like 270. He's up to like 280 this year. They like him a lot. I think the defense, I don't think it's going to miss a beat. I think it's probably going to be better. Benton's another year into it. Gio Paez is another year into it. Rodis Johnson is another year into it. I think it's very possible that the defense line is better this year. Linebacker takes a small step backwards, but is still really good. It's going to be one of the top 2 or 3 units in the Big Ten. And then we get to the secondary, right? And you lost all those dudes. And what did you do? You went out into the transfer market and you picked up 3 upperclassmen veteran corners. I think the corners are going to be just as good, if not better, this year, right? Jay Shaw was a guy who, you're talking about a dude who was a second-team All-Pac-12 player coming in with a ton of experience in a pass-happy league. Cedric Dort, these guys are really talented kids coming in with a ton of experience. And then at safety, listen, we've been excited to see Hunter Wohler step onto the field for 2 years. Ever since he committed to Wisconsin, the 4-star out of the in-state kid out of our 4-star kid out of Wisconsin. He's going to get that opportunity this year. John Torchio is an upperclassman at safety. Alexander Smith is a guy who's been in the program a long time in the secondary. I just think we're at a spot now with Wisconsin's defense. It's been so good for so long. Not just under Jim Leonard, going back to Wilcox, going back to Aranda, really since Dave Aranda came in. So you're talking about a decade now, right? You have about a decade of Wisconsin's defenses are always good to elite. And I'm just saying statistically, that's not an opinion. That's the truth, right? The numbers don't lie on this. Statistically, Wisconsin was the best defense in the country last year. And if you look at some advanced metrics, even that, they're the top 3. So there's a bit of a track record here. And I think I'm to a point where I came into this offseason, even before we got the transfers, thinking, I bet you they'll figure it out on defense. They're just going to figure it out because they always do. The front seven's too good. There's too much young depth stockpiled. And I think they did. I think the transfers coming in, I think the progression of the young outside linebackers and the veteran depth that they have at defense line, I think it's just another reload. There's no rebuild here with this defense, which again, we talked about this a couple times. It always circles back to that quarterback position, that offense. The defense has carried this team for far too long, right? Which is why we had talked about Chris needing to make some changes, which he did this offseason. Bobby Ingram coming in. They made changes on the offensive side, and I think the defense is going to continue to carry their weight. And if those offensive changes bear fruit, if those offensive changes come through, yeah, this could be a real dangerous team. But I think the defense is so good that the floor on this team is 8 wins, 7 wins at a minimum. Or, that 7 wins is as low as they'll go. So, yeah, I think I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I think the defense is in a spot where it just reloads now. But I'm definitely curious if you guys think I'm wrong on that. Let me know. Reach out. Thanks as always, guys, for listening to Locked On Badgers, making it your first listen every day. Really appreciate, by the way, we've had several new subscribers on YouTube. Guys, I appreciate it so much. Like, I wish I could just reach out and thank all you individually. It means a lot as we try to build this kind of Badgers community on Locked On. And, everyone that listens, not just on YouTube, on the podcast, the nice comments. I had a couple really nice reviews the other day. I just appreciate it so much, guys. Coming up this week, we have interviews with USA Today, Sports Illustrated. The dad of one of the last year's commits, I think, is coming on. I don't want to spoil too much, but those are, just think there's the really good interviews continuing to come up. Again, today's show is going to be an interview with John Blackwell. I apologize that we couldn't make that work, but I do want you guys to know that he was incredibly gracious with his time coming on the show and had a lot of great insight. So thank you guys again for making Locked On Badgers your first listen every day. Now, after you finish listening to us, go make Locked On NFL Draft your second listen. Okay, especially with draft coming up in 4 days. Ryan Tracy and former NFL quarterback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with analysis and insight on college football prospects and front offices. Also free and available wherever you get podcasts. Thanks, guys.